Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we are going to be discussing the book Rule of Claw, book number 1 in the Wolves of Worsham series by Valerie Evans. As a brief disclaimer, I did want to disclose that I received a digital ARC copy of the book in order to review and feature on my social channels, but that does in no way affect my actual review or thoughts on the book itself. That also does mean that I did receive an advance copy of the book, so there are liable to be some slight changes made to the final publicized version. So if any of my criticisms or notes here today don't apply to the final version, that just means that something slight was edited. I mean, or you just think I'm wrong, but you know. The book Rule of Claw takes place in a world that features werewolves and humans. There is also like a brief mention of vampires, but like they're not relevant in this particular book in the series. I assume that that's a bit of foreshadowing that'll come up later in the series. But it is set in a world with both humans and werewolves. And humans are aware of werewolves and their existence. Some aren't super enthusiastic about it. Some kind of are more so impartial, or kind of just like, you do your thing and you know it's fine. And then some people are like vehemently against the werewolves, you know, speciesism, which is more of a common occurrence in fantasy world novels. The book itself centers around two main characters with somewhat alternating viewpoints. We have Landon and Imogen. Landon returns home 12 years after abandoning his own family pack for another motorcycle related gang pack, and he has to find a way to make amends with everyone, this, you know, extensive family that he has that are in charge of some of the werewolves, and his ex-best friend slash lover Imogen, who has spent the past 12 years rising up in rank and trying unsuccessfully to forget her first love. So now this entire werewolf community has to navigate the struggles of Landon being back after so long, how that plays into the different power dynamics of the packs with their familial hierarchy, and Landon has to figure out how to re-enter his family that he hasn't had any contact with for 12 years. There's a lot of resentment between the siblings and the parents and just the entire pack's relationship. Not only do they have to navigate the struggles of Landon being back specifically, they also have to figure out how to deal with a series of anti-werewolf propaganda and attacks that have been occurring on the community that have left different pack members unable to turn into their werewolf selves. And as for the actual book and writing itself and some of my thoughts, most of my criticism actually does lie more so in the first few chapters. In the particular ARC copy, like digital copy that I got, the pages really, or the chapters are really only like 2 to 3 pages a piece. They're very, very short. Like, it's not a particularly extensive chunk of the book, but you know, the first couple chapters do have some grammatical errors that I did actually bring up to the author, so this may not be relevant by the time y'all are able to read the final published version. There were just a few grammatical errors here and there in the first couple of pages, and the vocabulary that was used felt like it was trying to sound more elevated and eloquent, but it did come at the expense of easy readability, and it was so focused on giving specific descriptions, whether it be physical locations or people's physicality and what they look like, that it did come at the expense of being able to lose yourself in the reading. You were trying so hard to focus on like all of these very specific physical descriptions that didn't end up being relevant for most of the book. But like I said, like this was definitely just the first couple of chapters, like the first few pages, and the more you read, that isn't an issue throughout the entire book at all. So as long as you can just get through the first couple of pages, like you're good to go, and the whole reading experience improves drastically. The book overall did a fairly decent job at world building. We didn't get so much information front loaded in this first book that it felt like too much useless information or like too much information at once, which is something that I see a lot in larger fantasy novels and series. Like they want to front load you with all of the backstory and all of the character mechanics and like world building and stuff like that, and it doesn't really feel so much like you're reading a proper novel. It feels like you're being given like an encyclopedia. Because too, on the flip side, like in my reading experience, I come across two extremes. There's either that where it's like the way too much, or there's like no background world building whatsoever, so you're thrown into it and like you're lost and don't entirely understand what's going on, and you just have to like make the connections for yourself. This was very nicely in the middle. There wasn't so much world building that it was distracting or anything, but you definitely got enough to where you got some kind of vibe of what exactly was going on and how the mechanics of this fantasy werewolf existence ends up working. So in this particular piece of media and in this series, the whole werewolf concept, the way it's described, it's like there are these humans and they're the people, and then they like coexist within themselves as also having a wolf, because they're referred to as like, it's not like, oh, like myself when I turn, it's like, oh, that's my wolf. So it seems kind of like they're almost separate entities but of the same person. That wasn't the best explained, but I think maybe you kind of understand what I mean. So it's not just like, oh, under the full moon, like you turn and that's the one time you turn and become a werewolf. They didn't specifically explain, but it was definitely implied that like under the full moon, it's more emphasized and a thing. But they do have the ability to be able to change into their wolf forms at any point in time that they like, except for one plot point in the series where there were these attacks that left some of the wolves unable to turn into their wolf forms, so they were just stuck in their human form, and that was part of the driving plot of the book. One element of the wolf theme that I did quite like was that they actually addressed the dilemma of like what happens to clothing when werewolves turn, because there are so many different medias where they just like don't address it and it's like a non-issue. Like there's just always magically clothes whenever like there needs to be clothes on a person, or like it'll happen like they'll turn and then like their clothes rip off and they have to deal with like being naked later. This book actually very specifically addressed it. In this media, the concept is like when you turn in, like you have to be naked in your human form like when you turn into your wolf, because then like your wolf is just a wolf and naked, and then when you want to turn back into your human form you have to find clothes again. So whether it's clothes that you acquire from like other people, or if you specifically like left your clothing somewhere, you have to be able to go back to get it when you want to turn back into your human self. XYZ. So I thought that that was a really nice touch. It was a really nice inclusion because so many different books tend to just not address that aspect of it. So I really liked that this book thought about it and like gave it to us. The characters were more or less fairly likable and easy enough to read about. I would, in future installments of the series, like to see a little bit more character development and personality come out, because like there was some in the first book, but there was just so much going on and so many different characters that we didn't get to have like a huge great affinity for what each individual person is like, and I would like to see more of that in future installments. And to me at least, the characters did feel a little bit younger than they're said to be, specifically with Landon and Imogen. The two main characters are supposed to be like in their 30s, and I definitely got more like mid to late 20s vibes from them. They just didn't feel quite adult enough to me to be in their early 30s. They definitely felt like they were still caught up on things from when they were teenagers and on lost love, and you know, more so invested in like family drama and just a few things that feel younger than what I would expect from like what we're told their ages are. I think it more so worked out that the author wanted like the main character Landon to have been gone for so long, so that it made sense that, you know, like, oh, like if he left, you know, when he was like an older teenager, like 12 years later, he's gonna be like early 30s. And it makes sense math-wise. One thing specifically that I do feel very, very enthusiastic about, and I did want to commend the author for, was one particular display of consent. And I do want to preface this by saying that like I recognize that it's fucked up to be so excited about a display of like consent done well, but because that's not something that we get to see a lot of the time, I am bringing it up and making it worthy of the praise. But I actually gave a brief summary of the scene where two people were clearly like in a moment leading up to the kiss, and the guy in the situation asked and was like, "Can I kiss you?" And the girl was just like, "I don't know if that's a good idea." And so he was like, "But that wasn't a no," like trying to feel out the vibe. And she was like, "No, it wasn't." So he was like, "Okay, like then I'm gonna kiss you." She didn't like protest, and they did, and it was like very, very mutual, and they were both into it for a moment, and then she pulled away and was like, "Hold up," and he immediately like also pulled away and was like, "What's up?" And they ended up talking about it, and it was just very, very nice to see that like there was a clear build-up moment to getting to that point, and that there was actual communication when they thought that they were interpreting the moment, and so then they have their moment, and then, you know, they're both into it and enjoying it for a while, and then the second that one of them was just like, like, hold up, like they were both like immediately out of it and be like, "What's going on?" And just the clear communication was so pleasant to see, because that is absolutely not something that I personally see a lot in books. So seeing this whole scenario play out, just very, very clearly consensual and having boundaries that were healthy and communicated, was just that good shit. Overall, within the book, I thought that it was a very nice, healthy balance, because it wasn't so heavy into like, oh, werewolf shit, and it wasn't so heavy in like, oh, people drama shit. Like there was a nice balance of both of them, and it was all very intermixed and felt very organic. Like pretty much I desperately would like to see this adapted into like a 2010 style Supernatural-esque TV show. I think would be the ideal platform for this particular story. Like, yeah, it's fun to read his books, but I just think like it would be so fun to see turned into a TV show, but like not, you know, the modern drama type deal where it's like hyper realistic and artistic, blah, blah, blah. Like I literally want to see something that looks like it came out of like the 2000s or the 2010s and is like serious and has a good plot line, but also is a little bit campy and like kind of filmed in a shitty way. And just, I don't know, that just, this is exactly how I envision it when I'm reading, and like this is what I picture. I just love the idea of it being a 2010s TV show. It's definitely the type of thing that like Sam and Dean would have walked into for an episode of Supernatural. I say with so much authority, having only watched season 1 of Supernatural. But it definitely like has that kind of vibe. So I'm actually curious to see how further installments of this book turn out. It is definitely one that I would be willing to read the next book in the series when it comes out. This particular book, Rule of Claw, is #1 in the Wolves of Worsham series. I will leave links below to the author and where you can find a copy of the book for yourself. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.